Hey guys, Chris here. Today I have a story that I believe is one of the scariest stories I've ever received. It's from one of our viewers, and he was in a cabin and something was trying to get into the cabin one night. That's next. Okay, so I am in the Sierra Nevada. I'm just below Abbott's Pass. It's well over 8,000 feet, and it's midday, and I found this spot in the forest here. It's really dark. It's really creepy. So that's where we're going to be doing the story today. Okay, so it is really dark in this part of the forest here. I got the creek right over there. That is where I put the beer, and the beer is Alibi Porter, and that is toasty, chocolatey, and nutty. And that is an English porter. It's going to be very dark. I'm not really sure what I'm getting into here, but willing to give it a shot. So, and that is 1 pint. English style porter. Oh yeah, that's very dark. Very nice. Oot. All right. Alibi Porter. Cheers. Late cheers. Boy, that's really tasty. Wow. It is kind of nutty, kind of toasty, kind of chocolatey. There you go. This story comes to us from one of our viewers. His name is Jack. And Jack said this encounter, this event in his life, altered his life, meaning his outdoor life of camping, fishing, hunting, backpacking. Anything to do with nature, it altered it. And the things that he did out there changed him forever. Jack said he grew up on a farm outside a very small town called Buena Vista, Virginia. Buena Vista has one streetlight, very small town. He grew up camping, hunting, fishing, very comfortable in the forest. In the early 1990s, he was 6'3", 220 pounds, spent 4.5 years in the Marines, USMC. Upon getting out of the Marines, he and his little brother and 2 other friends, former Marines, hiked the entire Appalachian Trail. It took them 5 months. He loved it. It was one of the best experiences of his life. Very capable guy in the outdoors. Back in the early 90s, he moved to Bethel, Connecticut, and he got a job with a government agency as an armed guard. While working there, Jack became good friends with a guy named Todd. They both loved nature, outdoors, and astronomy. Back in 1992, Todd's grandfather passed away, and he inherited a cabin up in New Hampshire. A stone and log cabin built in 1920, had one big room in it, and he was really excited about this. And he and Jack wanted to go check it out. So June of 1992, Jack, Todd, and another friend and their girlfriends decided to make the drive from Connecticut up to New Hampshire, to a small town called Glen, New Hampshire. It's in the northern half of New Hampshire, just about bordering on Maine to the east, and to the west is the White Mountains, White Mountain National Forest. Beautiful country, great mountains, wild country. Mount Washington is just a little bit north of there. Lakes, rivers, and streams, the White Mountains. They got to Glen, and then they made the drive out into the country, pretty far out, parked the car, and they had to hike about almost 2 hours to get to this cabin. They get to the cabin, they were a little disappointed. The cabin looked really good, but there were some issues with it. It needed a new roof. The door was really sketchy. It did not look secure, and it needed a new wood stove. So Todd, that summer, hired a contractor who was able to come out, and they found a Forest Service road that came out around, and they were able to bring supplies in, and they got a new metal roof on it, a new door, way more secure. It was a metal door, and a new wood stove. While they were there, they all discussed coming back in the fall once all these repairs were done. And they did in October of 1992. They all made the drive back up to Glen, very small town. It's actually just a little over 1,000 people in this town, Glen, New Hampshire. Made the drive out to the country, got back to this spot where they parked the car, hiked in, and they had a great time at the cabin. Everything was done, new door, new roof, new wood stove. They found a pond that was down below, had trout in it. The fall colors were going, and the stars came out at night, and they just had a great time. And Jack and Todd both said, what if we came back in the winter? And both the girls all said, you guys can come back in the winter because we don't want to deal with the cold and the snow. It just sounds crazy, but you guys have a guys' weekend next winter and do that. While they were there, they all discussed coming back in the fall once all these repairs were done. And they did in October of 1992. They all made the drive back up to Glen, very small town. It's actually just a little over 1,000 people in this town, Glen, New Hampshire. Made the drive out to the country, got back to this spot where they parked the car, hiked in, and they had a great time at the cabin. Everything was done, new door, new roof, new wood stove. They found a pond that was down below, had trout in it. The fall colors were going, and the stars came out at night, and they just had a great time. And Jack and Todd both said, what if we came back in the winter? And the girls all said, you guys can come back in the winter because we don't want to deal with the cold and the snow. It just sounds crazy, but you guys have a guys' weekend next winter and do that. So February 1993, Jack, his younger brother Mike, Todd, and two other friends, Art and Joe, made the drive from Connecticut up to Glen, New Hampshire, did the drive out to the country, parked the trucks, and they put all their gear on these sleds. They also had backpacks with gear in it. They were going to have a 4-day guy weekend, target shooting, ice fishing, hanging out, and just having a good time. Took them several hours to hike in. The snow was knee deep. They finally get to the cabin just before sundown. They open the cabin up, get the wood stove going, get dinner going. They're really excited, having a good time, had dinner, hanging out with the guys, making plans for the next day, and then about 11 o'clock, it's time to get to bed. Jack takes it upon himself to keep the wood stove going all night long. So he puts some more wood on the fire, goes to sleep. Jack wakes up again about 3 a.m., puts a little bit more wood in the wood stove, keep it going. They don't want to wake up to a cold cabin. Goes back to sleep. Right around 5 a.m., he's kind of half awake, contemplating putting some more wood in the wood stove. And right then, he hears outside, sounds like someone walking around the cabin. He sits up and he says, hey guys, listen, it sounds like there's someone outside. And the other guys woke up and they were wisely very quiet, and they were listening as well, and they're all looking at each other, and they're hearing someone walking around the cabin, someone or something. And they're all surprised because they're in the middle of nowhere. And right when I was about to walk around the front of the cabin, they all smelled this. The best way to describe it, according to Jack, was roadkill. This dead, rank, horrible smell, and they all smelled it. Then it walked around to the front right of the cabin, and it was definitely on 2 feet. They were listening intently, and then it was quiet, and then they heard it was on the roof, like it jumped up on the roof. And Jack said, no BS, you're going to think I'm crazy, but it jumped up on the roof. Right then, all the guys quickly and quietly got out of bed and got their weapons ready. No one was saying a word, and they're listening, looking at each other, and then looking up, and they're hearing this thing walking on the roof. It starts out in the corner, and it walks loudly to the peak, and then along the peak, and then back down the left side of the cabin. Then it's quiet again, and then they heard it land front left of the cabin. It just jumped off the cabin. Then it started circling the cabin again. It was fast and quick, not heavy and lumbering, but agile. It walked around the entire cabin, came up to the front, and this time it came up the front steps slowly and approached the front door. They could hear it just outside. And it paused, and it was quiet, just for a moment. And then they heard it pound on the cabin door. And then Jack said this will haunt him to his grave. He saw the front door handle turn to the left, turn to the right, and then shake violently. Then it was quiet again, and then, like all hell broke loose, it started pounding on the door with two fists, pounding and scratching, and Jack said it was pounding so hard he thought it was going to tear the door off its hinges. As quickly as it started, it stopped, and it was dead quiet. And it was still standing there because they did not hear it walk away. And only the sound of the wood stove of the fire slowly popping and cracking could be heard. This thing was standing outside the front door, almost like it was listening for them. They had their weapons, and they were standing there frozen with fear, trying to understand what its next move was going to be. This went on for over 30 minutes. They're just waiting to see what this thing is going to do. Then it quietly and slowly walked off the front porch and started walking around the cabin again. Came up to the front right corner of the cabin, and this time it made this horrible, high-pitched scream. Just terrifying. Jack said the closest thing he could think of was an Aztec Death Whistle. He said, look that up. The Aztec Death Whistle. I looked that up. I found out in the 1990s, some archaeologists in Mexico found this skull-shaped sculpture with like a chimney coming out the top of it in some ruins. And they weren't sure what that was used for, and they thought maybe for incense, for burial, some kind of ceremony, and then somebody blew into it and it made this high-pitched screaming sound. And the legend has it that Aztec warriors would take this death whistle into battle, and they would blow into it and make this high-pitched scream sound, and there would be hundreds of these warriors blowing into one of these things as they charged their enemy. That's the legend. They're not quite exactly sure what it was used for, but I found one online. You can buy these, you can buy replicas of them, and I got one on Amazon, $35, and I got it right here. This is what it looks like. It came in a bag like this, and this thing is crazy. Check that out. Look at that. Aztec Death Whistle. And you blow into it, makes this horrifying sound. Crazy. That's what it sounded like. That's what Jack said. It sounded like the Aztec Death Whistle. This is what Jack said it sounded like, and it did this 7 or 8 times. Then it stopped, and it was quiet again. And they're all listening, just terrified, out of their minds. And then they could hear it slowly walking away from the cabin, going to the left of the cabin, heading for the forest. Right then, Jack went to the left side of the cabin. There was a small window there, and he pulled back the curtain. He could see that the sun was coming up. He saw a red sky to the east. He saw a tall, thin, bipedal man thing slowly walking towards the forest. It was as white as the snow, and it had no fur on it, no clothes. The skin was white, pale white. It was corpse-like. This thing was 7 feet tall. Frightening. Had these long arms down to the knees. Then Jack said, "You're going to think I'm full of BS." He said this thing had horns or antlers on it. Almost like a spike buck. 2 horns on its head. He saw it from the back, walking away from him as it disappeared into the forest. As soon as it was light, they grabbed their backpacks and their rifles and they left everything behind. The coolers, the ice fishing gear, the food that they brought in for their 4-day trip. They left it all behind. They wanted to go as quick and light as possible and get out of there as fast as they could. They went out the front door. They're standing on the front porch. Todd closes the door, locks it, and he can now see that the front door, the metal door, was damaged. It looked like somebody had taken a hammer and pounded on the front door right in the middle of it, and there was also scratch marks. They all saw this. Then they turned and went down the stairs and walked over towards their trail that they made the day earlier to come in. They could see footprints heading off to the left that this thing made as it headed into the forest. Jack said these footprints were 12, 13 inches long, really long and narrow with these long toes or toenails. Really creepy. They all saw this, they noted it. They noticed that the tracks didn't turn and come back towards their trail. Their trail was going to the right. They got on the trail and they started hiking out. Every now and then they all stopped and would listen intently in case they heard some movement in the forest. They were also all looking for footprints in case this thing circled back and tried to cut them off. They carefully and quietly made it back to the truck. Got in the truck, drove back in stunned silence, only stopped for gas. They were relieved they got out of there when they did. Todd sold the cabin that spring. Jack said he's since moved to Virginia. He no longer camps, and whenever he does anything in the outdoors, which is rare, he brings a Glock 21 with him for protection. He also mentioned that if this thing had broken into the cabin, they would have not made it out alive. He said this thing was a true apex predator, a horrifying apex predator that they experienced. Also, he said he's only told this story to his wife, son, and his mom, and me. He does not go around telling this story to everybody. His wife's 90-year-old grandfather said, "You experienced a Wendigo." And that is our story from Jack in Connecticut and New Hampshire. I don't know much about a Wendigo, so if you guys know about Wendigo, tell me in the comments down below what you guys know. I'd love to hear about that. But thank you for listening to my story tonight. Really a crazy, creepy story. Unbelievable. So if you guys like stories about the strange, unexplained, and things that go bump in the night, please like and subscribe. You guys always know how to do that. I really appreciate that. Love the comments as always. And yeah, this has been fun in here. Look at this pine cone I found. That is a ponderosa pine cone. Massive. They're all over the place around me. It's great. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Keep hiking.